This title is sharp, direct, and emotionally charged. It evokes a strong reaction, drawing immediate curiosity and moral outrage. The implication of racial injustice coupled with an unexpected twist of regret hints that this is more than a simple case of police misconduct. It's a reckoning. Injustice, prejudice, and poetic justice. At the heart of this story is a powerful theme of systemic racism and the destructive consequences of prejudice. But it doesn't stop there. This isn't just a story about wrongful arrest. It's a story about what happens when the truth cannot be buried, when the powerful underestimate someone because of the color of their skin, and when karma delivers consequences in full. This story leans heavily into the drama and social justice genre, with elements of thriller and revenge. It will explore not only external conflict between the protagonist and corrupt officers, but internal conflict as well. How it feels to be humiliated, dehumanized, and underestimated, only to rise in a way no one expected. Emotion, righteous rage, injustice, triumph, regret. The dominant emotion in this story is a combination of rage and triumph. The audience should feel anger at the injustice from the start, empathy with the protagonist's humiliation, and satisfaction as the tables turn. There's also a thread of regret, but it doesn't belong to the hero. It belongs to those who misuse their power. The emotional arc will go from shock, anger, sorrow, rising hope, satisfaction, culminating in a moment of powerful poetic justice that forces the guilty to confront what they've done and forces the audience to question how often this happens in real life without consequence. This isn't a fantasy. It's a mirror held up to reality. The title hints at a systemic issue while promising a twist. The theme explores power, prejudice, and redemption, not through forgiveness, but through justice. This is the kind of story that starts with rage and ends with revelation. Whether you've experienced injustice yourself or simply want to see a corrupt system exposed, this story grabs your attention and refuses to let go. The cuffs clicked shut around his wrists with a cold finality. "Stop resisting," barked the taller of the two officers, even though the man stood still, hands raised high, eyes wide with disbelief. In the middle of a crowded parking lot, with phones recording and mouths gasping, a black man in a tailored gray suit was being slammed against the hood of his own luxury car. "I'm not resisting," he cried out, voice calm but firm, tinged with the disbelief of someone who knew this wasn't just a mistake. It was something else, something uglier. "What's the charge?" "Suspicion of auto theft," said Officer Granger, smug and expressionless as he patted him down roughly. "Suspicion?" The man's voice cracked. "This is my car." "Oh, of course it is," sneered the other officer, a younger, jumpier cop named Daniels. "Because guys like you always drive Mercedes S-classes with tinted windows, huh?" People in the parking lot started murmuring, filming. A woman in scrubs stepped closer. "I saw him get out of that car," she said. "He used the key fob. He beeped it before walking away." "Ma'am, step back," Granger said coldly. "You don't want to interfere with an arrest." "You don't want a lawsuit," the woman replied without flinching. "This looks real bad." The man, still bent against the car, clenched his jaw. "Open the glove box. My registration is there. My name is on the documents. Same on my license." But neither officer moved toward the car. They didn't care. The man, Michael, had been through this before. Not exactly like this, not this public, not this brutal, but enough times to recognize the pattern. The look in their eyes wasn't curiosity, it was conviction. A quiet, entitled certainty that they were right because of who he was and who they were. Officer Daniels leaned in close, breath hot on his cheek. "You think you're somebody, huh?" he whispered. Michael turned his head slightly. "I know I am." That's when Granger shoved him harder, muttering something under his breath. And just like that, they yanked him off the car, shoved him toward their cruiser, and stuffed him in the back like a common criminal. His expensive suit wrinkled, his tie askew, wrists bruising beneath steel cuffs. The cameras caught every second. But it didn't matter. Not yet. Inside the patrol car, Michael sat silently. His eyes scanned the dash. He knew police protocol. He knew what should be happening. The reading of rights, the paperwork, the call to dispatch. None of it was happening. Daniels sat behind the wheel, muttering about entitled punks and show-offs who think they own the world. Michael said nothing. He just stared forward, jaw tight. Then, Daniels reached for the radio. "Dispatch, we've got a 10 to 16, possible grand theft auto. Bringing him in. Michael's voice was calm but sharp. Call it improperly. My ID's in my wallet. You didn't even check it. Daniels ignored him. And that's when Michael realized they didn't want the truth. They wanted a moment. A display. A way to flex power over someone they thought was beneath them. But they had no idea who they'd just cuffed. And they'd regret this. Not today. Not even tonight. But very, very soon. Because Michael wasn't just some black man in a nice suit driving a better car than they thought he should. Michael was someone they should have recognized. Someone they'd wished they never touched. But now it was too late. The cuffs had clicked. The videos were already uploading. And the first domino had already fallen. 3 hours. That's how long they kept him in the holding cell before anyone even spoke to him again. Michael sat on the cold metal bench, hands clasped in front of him, his tailored suit now creased and dirted from the car hood and the station floor. His jacket was draped over his lap, and his tie hung loose, like a noose untied too late. He didn't look afraid. He looked tired. Because this wasn't about fear. Not anymore. It was about disappointment, a deep, bone weariness that came from years of walking through doors that slammed shut behind you simply because of the color of your skin. Michael Carter was 38 years old. A successful civil rights attorney with a string of landmark victories under his belt and a reputation for dismantling police misconduct cases with surgical precision. He wasn't a loud man, but when he spoke, even judges leaned in. His upbringing had been humble. The son of a retired firefighter and a schoolteacher in Atlanta, Michael had learned early on that the system wasn't built for people like him. It was built to watch them, to punish them, to break them. But his mother once told him, the most dangerous black man in America isn't the one with a weapon, it's the one with a law degree. So he got one. Harvard Law. Top of his class. Then, instead of cashing out with a big firm, Michael returned home and began fighting for those who had no one to stand up for them. He'd been called names, had threats sent to his house, had cases stonewalled and files accidentally lost. But he'd never been handcuffed. Until today. And that changed something in him. Because now it wasn't just injustice, it was personal. The cell door buzzed and creaked open. A heavy-set officer stepped in with a clipboard and a stiff nod. You're being released. Michael looked up, expression unreadable. Charges. The man shifted uncomfortably. None. Misunderstanding. You're free to go. Michael stood, brushing the dust from his slacks. I asked for a phone call 2 hours ago. The officer avoided his eyes. Policy changed. Michael stepped forward, slow and deliberate. No, it hasn't. I know the policy. I've argued the policy. You denied me that right. The officer didn't respond. Michael stopped inches from him, eyes locked. You tell Officer Granger and Daniels this isn't over. They'll remember my name. As Michael walked out of the station, the buzz of fluorescent lights gave way to the soft hum of a city night. His driver was waiting outside, an older man named Reggie who'd been with him for years. You all right, boss? Reggie asked, visibly shaken. Michael slid into the back seat without answering immediately. The silence between them was thick with unspoken truths. Finally, Michael said, pull the footage. All of it. Reggie nodded. Already done. Went viral about 2 hours ago. People are pissed. You trending all over social media. Hashtag Attorney While Black is blowing up. Michael sighed deeply. Good. Let them keep watching. I want every second of that arrest archived. Secure copies. Contact Kendra at the firm. Tell her we're filing by morning. Reggie gave a low whistle. Gonna sue him? Michael looked out the window. Not just sue them. Expose them. Systemic abuse is the disease. They're just symptoms. There it was, his fire again. Because beneath the calm, beneath the restraint, Michael Carter carried a righteous fury like a blade sheathed in velvet. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He executed, with facts, with law, with strategy. But underneath all the titles and victories, he was still a black man in America. And no number of degrees or courtroom wins had ever been able to make some people see him as anything more than a suspect. He hated that. He resented it. Because for every case he won, there were a dozen more people just like him, unrecorded, unnamed, and unseen, suffering silently in the cracks of a broken system. Michael reached into his inner pocket, pulled out his cracked phone, and scrolled through the footage someone had sent him. There it was. Daniels yanking his arm. Granger sneering as he called for backup. The woman in scrubs defending him. The crowd gasping. His face being slammed into the car. Michael watched it all, his expression still focused. This wasn't just about ego. It was about change. And sometimes, change needed a trigger. Well, now he had one. And he wasn't going to waste it. He turned to Reggie, voice calm but cold. They thought I was just some guy in a suit, he said. They thought wrong. The next morning, the courthouse buzzed with a kind of electric tension. Cameras were already lined up outside, reporters speaking in rapid-fire cadence as the footage from the night before looped on their screens. An award-winning civil rights attorney arrested without cause. His only crime, being black in a tailored suit. A growing call for the officers involved to be suspended. Michael stood in front of the building, briefcase in hand, his suit freshly pressed, his expression unreadable. His firm had advised him to lay low, to let things cool off before taking action. But Michael wasn't the type to wait for permission to demand justice. He stepped to the microphones like a soldier walking into battle. "Good morning," he began, voice steady. "My name is Michael Carter. Yesterday, I was unlawfully detained and publicly humiliated by 2 officers of this city's police department. I was not violent. I did not resist. I was profiled, harassed, and physically assaulted, on camera, in front of witnesses, because I fit a stereotype." Flashbulbs popped. Reporters leaned in. "This morning," he continued, "my firm is filing a federal civil rights lawsuit against Officers Daniels and Granger, the Westbrook Police Department, and the city itself. But this lawsuit is not about revenge. It is about accountability." He paused, his eyes scanning the crowd. "It is about the millions of unnamed black men and women who endure this treatment every day, without cameras, without headlines, without justice." The crowd erupted in questions. He didn't answer any. He didn't have to, because that speech, that moment, wasn't for them. It was for the system, for the walls that needed shaking. That same morning, Officer Daniels sat at his desk, pale and shaking. Granger paced beside him, angry and restless. "This is bull," Granger spat. "We didn't do anything wrong. We were doing our jobs." Daniels didn't respond. His mind was replaying the footage on his phone, over and over. His wife had seen it that morning. She hadn't said a word, just shook her head and walked away. "Why didn't you check the ID?" she'd asked, voice cold. He had no answer. Their captain stormed into the room, flanked by the city's legal counsel. "You 2 are on administrative leave. Effective immediately." Granger's jaw dropped. "What? You can't." The captain cut him off. "The mayor's office is getting calls every 5 minutes. Civil rights groups, media, hell, even the governors chimed in. You're both a liability right now." Daniel sat back, stunned. A liability. That word stuck to him like wet tar. At that very moment, Michael was in his office with Kendra, his top legal strategist, and a team of 3 junior associates. The energy was hot, focused, like a war room. "We already have over 60,000 shares on the original video," Kendra said, scrolling through the data. "Multiple law organizations want to join the suit as amici curiae. Public opinion is overwhelmingly in our favor." "Good," Michael nodded. "We're not just filing against the officers. We're building the case to dismantle their qualified immunity protections. No more hiding behind badges." One of the junior associates chimed in. "Also, a nurse from the scene, Jasmine Calloway, has reached out. She's willing to testify. Says she overheard the officers mocking you before they grabbed you." Michael's eyes sharpened. "Get her in for a deposition. Protect her identity for now. No press exposure. We do this right." But amid the whirlwind of legal firepower and public support, there was something else growing. Fear. Not Michael's. Theirs. Because for the first time in years, the police department was facing a foe who couldn't be bullied, silenced, or discredited. Michael knew their playbook, and he was about to burn it. By noon, national outlets had picked up the story. CNN, MSNBC, even Fox News, with its usual spin, couldn't ignore the tidal wave of public outrage. Protests erupted in front of the courthouse and at police headquarters. People held signs that read, "Suit is not equal to suspect. Attorney while black. Justice has a name, Michael Carter." Inside his office, Michael studied the growing map of media coverage. It was moving faster than expected, but he stayed grounded. "This isn't about me," he said to his team. "It's about precedent." But privately, it was about him too. He remembered the way his face was shoved into that hood. The heat of humiliation crawling up his spine. The laughter in Granger's voice. He remembered how Daniels had looked right at him and still didn't see him. He was determined to make them see now. That night, a special city council meeting was called. Members argued over damage control and optics. The mayor, red-eyed and flustered, barked into her phone. "This could ruin us," she snapped to her aide. "He's not some random guy. He's Michael Carter." And she was right. Because Michael wasn't just a victim. He was a force. He had the law. He had the truth. And now, he had the nation's eyes on him. 3 weeks later, the courtroom was standing room only. Media trucks lined the streets outside, their antennas pointed skyward like sentinels. Protesters chanted in rhythmic unison. News anchors adjusted their makeup and straightened their ties as they delivered live updates to millions. Inside, the air was thick. Press, family, activists, curious citizens. And somewhere in the back, tucked into the shadows, were other officers, silent and watching, uncertain whose side they were on. At the front, Michael sat with his team, calm, centered, sharpened like a blade. Across from him sat officers Daniels and Granger, flanked by their union lawyers, stiff and stoic, but noticeably rattled. What they had thought would be a minor PR incident had bloomed into a constitutional case. The city's legal defense was scrambling, and the first witness was about to take the stand. "Call Nurse Jasmine Calloway." She walked in slowly, wearing a nurse's uniform under a black blazer. Her eyes were steady, voice clear. "Miss Calloway," Michael began, "can you tell the court what you witnessed on the night of March 14th? She nodded. "Yes. I was across the street, just outside the ER doors, when I saw the police approach Mr. Carter." "And what happened next?" "They grabbed him suddenly. Didn't ask him anything. He was just standing there. When he tried to speak, they cut him off and pushed him against the hood." Michael leaned in. "Did you hear anything the officers said?" Jasmine hesitated, then said. One of them laughed and said, "Looks like he stole the suit too." Gasps filled the room. A few audience members shook their heads in disgust. Michael continued, "And did he resist arrest? Did he raise his voice or threaten them in any way?" "No," Jasmine replied firmly. "He was calm, confused, and silent after a while." "Thank you," Michael said, stepping back. The city's attorney stood, adjusting her glasses. "Miss Calloway, are you a friend of Mr. Carter's?" "No." "Are you being compensated for your testimony?" "No." "Then why are you here?" Jasmine looked around the courtroom before answering, her voice suddenly emotional. "Because I've seen this too many times. And this time, the man had power. He had a voice. I knew it would matter if I said something." Silence. The jury watched her, moved. Daniels looked down, face red with shame. Granger? Still scowling. Next, Michael played the footage again, the entire video that had gone viral. But this time, he paused, frame by frame. He pointed to Daniels' hand on his wrist, the white marks left behind. He pointed to the way Granger shoved him even after he'd said, "I'm an attorney." He paused on Michael's face, calm, composed, yet restrained like a criminal. "You all saw the video," Michael said, turning to the jury. "But I want you to feel what it means to be presumed guilty without action, voice, or reason." Then, he held up a folder. Exhibit C, Officer Daniels' record. He opened it. 3 complaints filed over the last 5 years for racial profiling, all dismissed due to insufficient evidence. He turned another page. Officer Granger, 5 complaints, including use of excessive force and verbal abuse. Again, no disciplinary action taken. He let that sink in. What do you call a system that sees smoke and refuses to look for fire? The courtroom was tense. Even the judge shifted uncomfortably. Then came the moment. The twist. Michael pulled another document from his folder. "This," he said, "is a confidential memo leaked by someone inside the department, dated 3 days after my arrest. In it, city officials discuss minimizing the incident and protecting the department from civil liability. They describe me not as a victim, but as a media risk. Not once did they refer to me as a citizen or a human being." He held the memo high for all to see. In their eyes, I was not a man who had been wronged. I was a problem to be contained. Gasps filled the room again. The mayor's name was on the memo. So was the police chief's. Suddenly, this wasn't just about 2 cops. It was about a whole chain of rot. Michael ended his statement slowly, eyes piercing into every corner of the room. They didn't just insult a black man. They disrespected the law, the uniform, the oath. And today, We're here not just to expose that, but to end it. The judge called a recess. Reporters flew out of the courtroom like birds freed from cages. Twitter lit up. Hashtags like hashtag Justice for Michael and hashtag System on Trial began trending worldwide. In the hallway, Michael stood surrounded by supporters. A young law student approached him, tears in her eyes. "You're changing everything," she whispered. "I've never seen anyone fight like this." Michael smiled softly. "I'm not fighting for change. I'm reminding them who we are." Back in the courtroom, Daniels sat with his head in his hands. Granger leaned in. "They're gonna hang us, man." Daniels didn't answer. Because deep down, he knew they weren't just on trial for what they did to Michael. They were on trial for every time they'd gotten away with it. And for once, the system was listening. The final day of the trial arrived under gray skies. It was as if even the heavens were holding their breath. Inside the courtroom, not a seat was empty. Spectators pressed against walls. Security had doubled. And the jury, tired, solemn, but attentive, filed in for the last time. Michael stood, unshaken, every word of his closing argument burning behind his eyes. This wasn't just about personal vindication. This was about something larger, something sacred. When the judge nodded, Michael rose and walked to the center of the room. His voice was low, but it echoed with power. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began. "Thank you." He paused. "I thank you not just for your time, but for your presence in something far greater than a legal case. Because what you've witnessed is a pattern, a culture, and a reality that, for too long, has been brushed aside." He let the silence stretch, then continued. "Let me tell you what I remember most from that night. I remember Officer Daniels grabbing my arm before asking a single question. I remember Officer Granger slamming me against the hood of my car, mocking my appearance. I remember the cold steel of handcuffs biting into my wrists. But most of all, I remember the look in their eyes." He stepped closer to the jury. They didn't see a lawyer. They didn't see a citizen. They saw a black man and thought, threat. A few jurors lowered their eyes. Others clenched their jaws. And I want you to imagine something. Imagine walking into a courtroom every day as someone who's mastered the law, only to be treated like someone who broke it. Imagine earning degrees, arguing cases, and defending the Constitution, only to be manhandled by the very people sworn to uphold it. He looked around the room, at the reporters, the cameras, the judge. At what point do credentials stop protecting you? At what point does excellence no longer grant safety? Is it when your skin's a certain shade? Your name a little too ethnic? Your walk too confident? Michael's voice cracked, not from weakness, but from truth. "I am not asking you to punish them because I was humiliated. I am asking you to hold them accountable because if you don't, you tell every young boy who looks like me that the system was never meant to protect them." The courtroom was still. A pin could have dropped. He concluded with quiet, fierce grace. "Justice cannot be an idea we aspire to. It must be a reality we demand." With that, he stepped back to his seat. The city's attorney offered a bland, procedural defense. She called the event unfortunate, but not malicious. A misunderstanding. She urged the jury to remember the pressure police face daily. But her words were hollow. Her tone couldn't match Michael's fire. And everyone knew it. When the jury left to deliberate, tension clung to the room like static. Hours passed. Then a buzzer. Everyone stood as the jury filed back in. The forewoman, a middle-aged black woman with silver braids and steady eyes, held the envelope. The judge opened it. Read. Nodded once. Then spoke. "In the matter of Michael Carter versus Officers Daniels and Granger, we find the defendants guilty of unlawful arrest, misconduct, and violation of civil rights." Gasps. Applause. A few shouted with joy. Others cried silently. The judge raised a hand for order, but the wave of emotion had already rolled through the chamber. Furthermore, the judge added, "The court recommends internal investigation into department policy and oversight protocol to prevent further abuses of power." Daniels slumped back in his chair, stunned. Granger gritted his teeth and stared forward blankly. But it wasn't over. Michael stood once more, his final statement now personal. "I don't celebrate their downfall," he said softly, "but I affirm our rising. Today was never about revenge. It was about reminding the system who it serves." Outside, the city erupted. People cheered in the streets. Cameras flashed. Civil rights leaders praised the verdict as historic. Lawyers called it a new standard for accountability. The mayor, under pressure, promised sweeping reforms and offered Michael a formal apology on behalf of the city. But Michael didn't stay for the spotlight. He returned home, where his mother waited on the porch, tears streaming, arms open. She held him like he was 5 years old again. "You did it," she whispered. He shook his head. "We did." The following week, Michael held a press conference, not to gloat, but to mobilize. "I will be establishing a nonprofit," he announced, "to provide legal support and education to victims of racial injustice, especially those without resources or representation." The foundation was called the Carter Justice Initiative. Within months, it was funded by major donors. Celebrities endorsed it. Young law students volunteered. Cases began pouring in from across the country. Michael became a face of change, but more importantly, a force of it. And as for the department, Daniels was dismissed. Granger too. A wave of resignations followed. The police chief was forced into early retirement. And within a year, the city implemented body cam mandates, civilian oversight boards, and racial bias training with real consequences. It wasn't perfect, but it was a beginning. In the end, Michael stood not just as a man who overcame humiliation, but as a symbol of what happens when truth refuses to be silenced. And every young black boy watching, they now had proof that you could wear the suit and own the system, that justice could finally look like them.